Well, somebody is bitter. With just 21 days to go, President Biden seems to be spending his final stretch wallowing in self-pity, angry and resentful as he braces for his legacy to be obliterated. For example, while addressing the nation on the loss of President Jimmy Carter, Joe Biden couldn't help but take a cheap shot at President-elect Donald Trump.
Thank you. President Trump to take from President Carter?
Decency. Decency. Decency.
And that's not his only grievance. Joe Biden told the public that he has no regrets, but behind closed doors, he's full of them. The big guy regrets dropping out of the 2024 race and thinks he could have beat Trump if his own party hadn't shoved him out the door. He's also furious that his lawfare was a dud. Quote, in private, Biden has also said he should have picked someone other than Merrick Garland as Attorney General, complaining about the Justice Department's slowness under Garland in prosecuting Trump and its aggressiveness in prosecuting Biden's son, Hunter. But Joe isn't the only one with regrets. His friends in the liberal media now feel bad, covering up his obvious cognitive decline. Watch.
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate. It's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years, and yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary for the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election.
So, Kennedy, how do you feel about these journalists now saying it's evident that Joe Biden had a cognitive decline all of a sudden?
Jan Crawford is not going to be popular at the CBS New Year's Eve party. Let me tell you that right now. She has been red-pilled. And my question is, hey, Jan, what took you so long? Yeah. You know, it's like the evidence was there. There were a lot of us talking about all of this for years and years and years, you know, before 2020, saying, well, it was pretty obvious why Obama didn't pick Biden to be his successor in 2016, because he didn't think he was up for the job. And, you know, there was a lot of decline for him between 2016 and 2020. And even in 2020, he didn't believe in himself. And he said, I'm a transitional candidate. I'm only going to be president for 4 years, dead people. And, you know, then we were stuck with him. They bypassed the primary process, and that wasn't him alone. That was his handlers. That was the party. That was the Democrat establishment. There was Jeffrey Katzenberg. It was the donors. It was the fundraisers. Anyone who had access to him, anyone, not just the last person in the room, Kamala, but anyone knew that he was in cognitive decline. Anyone who has had a family member who has experienced things like Alzheimer's and dementia, they know what they were seeing, and they did nothing about it because he was hungry for power. He wanted to hold on to it. His family pushed him to hold on to it, and everyone else around him knew that him maintaining the presidency was a condition of their employment. So they said and they did nothing until now. Those words are absolutely empty and meaningless.
Yeah, it's purely ideological. So, Leslie, as the Democrat at the table, you know, it's not that there was a difference in June between Joe Biden in February when Robert Hur came out with the special counsel report saying we can't charge him with a bunch of felonies he's actually committed because he can't remember anything. It was that they got exposed. And it wasn't just Joe Biden. It was also the media and Democrats around him, including George Clooney and Barack Obama, who just a month earlier were asking for millions of dollars for his reelection campaign. And then he comes out to the debate and they're like, oh, now we need a new guy. So how do you explain the lack of transparency, given that Americans saw what was going on, which is why they voted against Kamala Harris and for Trump in November?
Well, I don't know. I see decline in Trump. I saw decline in Biden. I mean, at least I'm being honest. I'm not being disingenuous. This is what bothers me, is that with all due respect to Jan, and I'm sure you're right, she's not going to be loved at the Christmas party at CBS. Look, I don't know what rock she's living under, with all due respect, because every time I turned on the channel and the ratings with some of our competitors at other cable news networks who lean left were getting killed. I mean, the ratings were dropping. Why? Because my side was going, stop just talking about Biden's decline. Stop just talking about Biden's dementia. Why aren't you talking about the decline of Donald Trump as well? I think it was valid to talk about this for both candidates, to be honest.
Do you think those networks were covering his decline? Because I don't.
I did, yes, absolutely.
Other channels were not
Well, if
touching
they were
this
covering,
story.
then why is Jan Crawford saying it's the most underreported story of the year?
With all due respect, one person's opinion, it does not mean that is a fact or be the opinions of everyone else. I disagree with her. And I'm a Democrat, but I disagree with her.
They were literally telling us, I'm sorry to jump in, on the eve of the debate, when he glitched out so poorly he was forced off the ticket, they were telling us that morning these were cheap fakes. That's what the liberal media was saying. They were saying, no, you imagine this. If you look from this angle, he actually ran the 100-meter hurdles and broke the world record. Yep. From that angle, it looks like Obama let him off the stage. That's the cheap fake angle. But in the real angle,
that's not what I said, although you're going to get your chair that you said you were going to throw at me.
Other networks. Joe Scarborough was on TV, and he said, F you if you can't handle the truth. Right. This is the sharpest Joe Biden has ever been. Right. He said that.
This is not just one journalist.
I didn't say that, and I don't agree with that either. But I also did not agree with the George Clooney's of the world. Like, we asked him, no offense, George, what his opinion was, who our candidate was going to be, because I really felt it was a horrific debate, but I felt you just don't walk away after one. I'm sorry. I really felt he would have had a stronger showing, even if he didn't beat Trump, than Kamala Harris. I really do. At the end,
let's go back to Joe Biden's legacy and his record.
Delusion is a hell of a drug.
It is indeed. But stop. One thing that Joe Biden is reportedly talking about behind closed doors, Charlie, and I think the most significant thing that he says to people who aren't out in the public is that he believes he should have picked a different attorney general because Merrick Garland did not engage soon enough in the lawfare to take him off of the campaign trail. I mean, that is a democracy-ending principle if you want to throw your opponents in jail because you can't run against them.
I had to read that part of the story like 4 times because I was like, there's no way that he's blaming the picking of Merrick Garland because Merrick Garland wasn't politicized enough against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It was, and the whole article was so delusional. And the idea that he, if he had stayed in the race, he was going to beat Donald Trump is laughable. I also think it's kind of interesting that it was all these anonymous sources. You had the Harris camp and you had the Trump camp, and the Biden camp, and they're whispering behind the scenes, each of them pointing fingers at the other. Because the Harris campaign says, oh, if he had gotten out sooner, I would have been able to beat him. And it's like, no, you spent over $1 billion in 100 days and lost. If she had had 200 days, she would have lost worse, I think. And so the whole thing is complete. You're right. Delusion is a marvelous drug, and I'd like to know where to get it.
Wait a minute. Then you're sharing my delusion, because I do agree with you that she still would have lost.
No, but here's the thing, Leslie. The fact that they both would have lost to Donald Trump proves that it wasn't about voting against Trump. It was about voting for Trump, which is why he won in such a landslide for his agenda.
I think it was messaging. I think that my party was really bad about the messaging,
it's especially
on crime, economy, and immigration.
No, it's not. Every time they say messaging, people don't get their opinion on the economy from MSNBC. They get it from their bank account. They get it from their cash register. That's the real messaging. What the media is doing here is they're engaging in this exercise of retroactive ass covering. Okay, on the Biden dementia story, they're trying to make it look like they got it wrong, which implies that there was an effort to get it right, which we all know was not the truth.
Like they didn't know.
The idea that this was the most underreported story of 2024, it was the most underreported story of 23, 22, 21, and 2020. Joe Biden is the only president in history who makes the sign language interpreter shrug. Okay, that's not normal. Okay, he talked to dead people. Now we're going to sit here and go, gee, I wonder if only somebody would have checked on the guy talking to dead people,
Yeah.
Who knew?
And all the explanations from the White House podium about him talking to dead people after wandering off stage, getting lost. It was always the American people who were not seeing it. And the president
was the real
fine.
messaging problem.
Quick litmus test, could Joe Biden, and ask yourself this honestly, could Joe Biden have sat with Joe Rogan for 3 hours?
If that is the litmus test to be president, then I need to move. Okay,
no, but the answer
I'm a Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris,
the answer is no.
What? 18 years younger than Donald Trump. She could not have done it.
No,
she couldn't. By her own admission, she could not have sat for 3 hours.
She should have done it, but that
Joe
should
Biden
not.
couldn't have done it.
She should have done it, but that should not determine who our president is. I don't care what party.
3 hours and have a contemporaneous, spontaneous, challenging discussion, because there aren't a lot of people who can do that. There certainly aren't a lot of people running for president who could do it, and there's certainly only one person who's going to be president who could do it and did it.
Okay, listen to this. President Biden reportedly regrets his decision to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. He's regretting it. The Washington Post with this quote: Biden and some of his aides still believe he should have stayed in the race despite the rocky debate performance and low poll numbers that prompted Democrats to pressure him to drop out. Here's Charlie Hurt with his take.
It is the most delusional thing that I've ever read in politics in the last couple of months, which is really saying something. Until they work through all of these internal problems, Democrats have a long way to go.
Okay, Lucas Tomlinson is in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, where Biden is taking his final vacation as president. Lucas, are you hearing anything from their camp?
Well, I should recall a new CNN poll in July of 2022 that said 75% of Democrats didn't want Joe Biden to run for re-election. And his approval rating has been underwater since that hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. We did hear some reaction on our air earlier today.
Well, Biden and his aides may very well believe that they could have defeated Donald Trump. That's not what the data suggests. The data suggests that Joe Biden never led over the course of the better part of a year into the campaign.
And Aisha, President Biden's approval rating right now is hovering at around 39% right now. That's about the same as when Jimmy Carter left the White House. In that Washington Post piece, Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, came to the president's defense saying, quote, "The president has been operating on a time horizon measured in decades, while the political cycle is measured in 4 years." And while Carter had to deal with the American hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Biden's low approval rating has also been weighed down by the war in Gaza, where American hostages remain today. And according to that Washington Post piece, Biden has other regrets as well, including his pick for Attorney General. Quote, Biden also has said he should have picked someone other than Merrick Garland as Attorney General, complaining about the Justice Department's slowness under Garland in prosecuting Trump and its aggressiveness in prosecuting Biden's son Hunter. Aisha, speaking of Jimmy Carter, it's worth noting that the 39th president visited here in St. Croix for New Year's back in 2010, staying at the Comanche Hotel just over my shoulder behind me in downtown Christiansted of Jimmy Buffett fame. He brought 31 family members with him, Aisha.
Let's talk more about Joe Biden, because he has some regrets. Wishes he'd done some things differently. Now that he is on the doorstep of walking out of the White House, he's looking back and saying, hey, what could I have done differently? And the main thing seems to be he wishes he would have stayed in the race. He thinks he could have won with some of the reports over the weekend. Somewhat delusional that he thinks he could have won. Because, I mean, he did give us all this evidence when he took the stage in that debate against Donald Trump.
That $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. If they just paid 24% or 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
That was the moment. And look, the struggling, the losing his train of thought, and then we finally beat Medicare, very, very strange thing. And the problem that just comes back to mind, guys, is we were told, leading up to that moment, aggressively, indignantly, that man was not only perfectly fine in that moment, he was suited and ready to go for 4 more years.
And in
That's
control.
what they told us, right? In control, sharp as a tack, all of that nonsense. And then the lie, which was clearly a lie to many of us for quite some time, totally disintegrated over a span of about 20 or 25 minutes on that debate stage. That's why I think, Joe Biden's sort of an ornery guy in some respects. He's very proud. I'm sure he does believe that he could have stayed in the race and not been forced out and could have won.
but delusional, I think, is the right word there. Kamala Harris was untalented and a terrible candidate, but she lost less badly than he would have, because the American people, 70 million tuned into that debate, they saw that person and said, there is no way he can be president for 4 more years. He would have lost badly, I think.
I just remember going back to this summer and the way this whole thing played out. So there was this debate, then there was rumor about whether Joe Biden would stay in the race. Then George Clooney comes out with the op-ed that was the first knife in the back. After just 2 months earlier, he told the country at that fundraiser with Obama that Joe Biden's fine. He should be the next president. He's totally fit to continue on this race. You should all give millions of dollars to keep him on the campaign trail against Donald Trump. Biden said, no, I'm staying in. Then you started seeing additional people coming out and saying it's time to go. Nancy Pelosi was circling the wagons. You had Barack Obama doing it. You had Adam Schiff doing it. And as Joe Biden continued to double down and make the single case, show me polling that shows that Kamala Harris is a better candidate than I am against Trump, and I will drop out of the race. They couldn't do it. And eventually the pressure got so high that he resigned from the campaign trail through a letter that was put out on a Sunday afternoon on X. And we didn't hear from him for 24 hours. So there wasn't a lot of explanation about why. After for weeks he was saying, I'm not leaving the race. I can beat Trump. I'm a better candidate. And now the Washington Post is reporting it this way. They're saying, quote, in private, Biden has also said he should have picked someone other than Merrick Garland as his attorney general, complaining about the Justice Department's slowness under Garland in prosecuting Trump and its aggressiveness in prosecuting Biden's son, Hunter. So while all this is going on with him being exposed at the debate for his mental acuity, his son, Hunter, is going to be on trial for a number of felonies. And at this time, he's still insisting he's not going to pardon him, which, of course, we all know was not true either.
So he's laying his cards on the table as well. The lawfare was designed to affect the electoral hopes of Donald Trump. And he's saying, Merrick Garland didn't press the issue enough, or I would have won. Soon enough, fast enough, hard enough. And if you had Merrick Garland, he has regrets apparently now about Merrick Garland, then I might have won. I mean, you have explained exactly what we all accused you of for some time. You're using the justice system, weaponizing it in pursuit of a political end.
So if he had put him in prison, federal prison, before the Supreme Court could have come down with the immunity ruling that they did in June, that's Biden's argument, that he would have been able to win this election, which is insane and anti-American.
Reportedly complaining enough to enough people behind the scenes that this is now leaking out to the Washington Post. His one, aside from getting out of the race, his one biggest regret is having an attorney general who didn't prosecute his opponent fast enough and who did prosecute his criminal son. And he's saying it openly. So the game is sort of over at this point, right? And so he's dishing out his pardons and grousing on his way out the door. And I think there's a reason why his approval ratings are absolutely in the toilet right now. He has very much earned them.
And what does Joe Biden do when he leaves office on January 20th, right? I mean, the Democratic Party is looking forward to him leaving.
Well, he can finally take a break and go to the beach.
He can finally take a vacation, maybe. But what a legacy there.
President Biden is reportedly expressing regret for dropping out of the 2024 presidential race. According to the report, Biden believes he could have beaten Trump if he wasn't pushed out by his own party. Lucas Tomlinson is live in St. Croix, that's lovely, where Biden is spending the holidays. Lucas.
Good afternoon, Tammy. President Biden's approval rating remains around 39%. It's been underwater since that hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. But as you mentioned, it doesn't appear to have stopped some of his aides. You say Biden should not have dropped out of the race. Instead, the president thinks the same thing. Let's take a look at that Washington Post piece, which says, quote, Biden and some of his aides still believe he should have stayed in the race, despite the rocky debate performance and low poll numbers that prompted Democrats to pressure him to drop out. Biden and these aides have told people in recent days that he could have defeated Trump. According to people familiar with their comments who spoke in the condition of anonymity, describe private conversations. Aides say the president has been careful not to place blame on Harris or her campaign. Now, what's likely that would have not helped his campaign, Biden's reelection campaign, are these newly released photos from the National Archives showing Biden shaking hands and posing with Chinese businessmen alongside Hunter and his business associates during a December 2013 official trip to Beijing when Biden was vice president. Biden has long denied any involvement in his son's overseas business dealings.
I've never discussed my business or their business, my sons or daughters.
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
Now, many Republicans have long claimed Biden has not been truthful with this matter, including James Comer yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures.
Joe Biden lied. He did, in fact, introduce his son to all these Chinese people. Joe Biden did, in fact, meet with all these Chinese people that were wiring his family millions of dollars for mysterious reasons. And we knew it, and I think the American people with common sense knew it.
Now, the White House reacting to these new photos, saying, quote, "This trip, which occurred over a decade ago, is old news. House Republicans already wasted years and millions of taxpayer dollars, proving the president was not in business with his son. It's past time to call it a day." Hunter's lawyer also responding to these new photos, saying there's nothing new here about these new photos. Ladies, gentlemen, Tammy?
All righty, Lucas, thank you, sir, very much. And great assignment you've got there in St. Croix.
Yeah, right?
My goodness, the one thing,
Joe
Biden.
Biden. Tough job, Lucas.
Yeah, tough job. Thanks, Joe Biden. All right, well, look, what I find very interesting, Lisa, is this argument that he could have won, which is exclusively a statement about Kamala Harris. That's a statement about her. And then they say, oh, he doesn't want to make a statement about her. That is the thing that does. And it's interesting in that they believe that he would have, and I actually believe he would have been better, but that's how bad she was. And yet it doesn't mean he would have won. They're still putting the Trump victory in this context as an accident because of a decision they made. What's your take on that?
Well, he won the popular vote, right? So the American people were on his side. If the executives are listening, if Lucas needs a break, especially for the new year, I will gladly fly there and cover for him in St. Croix.
Yeah.
But to your point, look, the American people, I've been saying this. This was a rejection of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the left, but this was also an election for Donald Trump, choosing his mandate, choosing the America First policy. The two most important defining dates in the election cycle were June 27th and July 13th. June 27th was when Donald Trump ended Joe Biden's career on the debate stage at CNN, where it was so bad that even the media had to admit that they were lying to us about cheap fakes. The left had to admit to us that, no, Joe Biden does not have all his faculties. And then, of course, July 13th, in the manner in which Donald Trump survived the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. Because Americans needed a fighter at the time, and they saw that in Donald Trump with the fight, 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 the USA. And then additionally, it dispelled this notion that he was the threat to democracy, because most people are thinking maybe the people trying to kill him are the threat to democracy.
Right.
So, no, I think Joe Biden would have lost by, bigger margins, and this was Donald Trump's to always win.
It exposes a certain level of delusion. But, John, let me ask you about his remarks about Merrick Garland, where he felt that was a big mistake. Apparently, he was convinced to do it. Again, some of this article kind of gives a position that Biden was actively involved in some of these decisions, or was wandering around thinking about presidential theory and history and what should he do. Clearly, though,
that's my job, by the way.
Right, there you go. Ron Klain is reportedly the one who really pushed for Garland. But the argument, sir, was that they didn't prosecute Trump fast enough and shouldn't have gone after Hunter. So it still moves into a confirmation that it was lawfare that they were relying upon.
If you needed any proof that Biden was not mentally capable and should not have served a second term, it's comments like these. He was elected, if he had read the nation right, read the people right, he was elected to be a transitional figure. He instead thought he was a revolutionary figure like FDR or LBJ, and he was intent on breaking all kinds of norms to get there, and lawfare is the best example. How can someone think the best thing for the country would have been to prosecute your leading rival, with all the powers of the federal government behind you, to produce an electoral outcome? That is the first time in American history that's ever happened. It's terrible for the country. He has opened up a cycle of retaliation that is going to undermine our politics for years. His family's going to experience it from all those pictures we saw of him glad-handing it with the Chinese. Congress and the U.S. attorney should be all over that in the next administration. But that, to me, shows that he's putting himself before the best interests of the country. If we talk about whether Carter was a good president or not, Carter didn't put himself before the country. Biden saying it would have been better for him to be president another 4 years in his mentally diminished state when aides were covering up for him for years, and then that I should have prosecuted Donald Trump in 2021 shows that he actually didn't have the best interests of his own country at heart.
You know, it could be an argument that Carter was perhaps the first example of where aides and the left had moved into the nature of what the president would do and where they felt that they were the president, Molly, not the president, because, you know, he handed over the Panama Canal, established the Department of Education and the Department of Energy, massive government expansion, of course, leading to more spending, massive inflation. I mean, it's an argument there. But here you've got, you know, speaking of the photos of him with the Chinese associates, effectively introducing them, it appears, to Hunter. It's one thing to say that, you know, we've looked at his accounts and there was no money, but there's the power of being vice president and then president is what we have argued, I've argued, has informed that relationship. Yeah. Because of his position as president.
Yeah,
and now we know.
Yeah, on this postmortem that continues, a personal postmortem, it's almost into a forlorn fantasy now. We're digging through this article, you know, and it's time to move beyond that. And then when you see a photo like this coming out, this really remarkable photo, where the heck has this photo been? Why wasn't all of this out when the House and the Republicans were trying to get to the bottom of all this? Hunter's lawyer, reacted to this, saying there's simply nothing new here. And they've got a point. And I think, the other side of the aisle could very well agree to that. This is something we've seen before, and we should have seen this photo long ago, and there should have been questions asked about it and answered about it. And likely, as you mentioned, John, there may very well be more questions to come. Yeah. To the extent it just reinvigorates what we've already known and what Republicans have been alleging and looking into, and the questions about influence peddling continuing.
You know, Nicole, this also, though, reminds the American people that things were kept from us, right? Even Obama joined in his team in the lawsuit to keep these photographs in the National Archives, which has become obviously very politicized as well. But this is not good for the legitimacy of the government, of what the impact is on now what the American people are watching unfold in the aftermath.
Well, the secrecy of this presidency, from the ties with Hunter Biden and all of his business connections to President Biden's mental and physical fitness, I mean, all of this was hidden from the American people for the last 4 years. And Democrats are finding themselves in this shoulda, coulda, woulda moment, and they're starting to point fingers. At the bottom line, Harris campaign, Biden campaign, neither were prepared for the Goliath of the Trump campaign, which really used the media effectively to their benefit, and they connected with the American people. They acknowledged what the people were needing to hear right now. Maybe in 2022, you know, as John was mentioning, President Biden was supposed to be a transitional president. He had alluded to he would do a term and then give it to the next generation. But I don't know if it was narcissism or what it was that kept him to run again. Yeah. But that was what happened. And they were going to lose. They staged a coup. They put in Kamala Harris, who the Democrats themselves rejected in 2019.
Bill, on President Biden's part, wishful thinking, completely delusional, anything else?
Yeah, I think it shows why he never should have run. You know, his argument is, I'm the only man that ever defeated Trump. But the problem that the Democrats had then, people were seeing Biden through the lens of the June 27th debate, when he looked totally confused and out of it and incoherent. There's no way Joe Biden would have won. But I think he feels vindicated, or at least that he has his revenge. They got what they wanted. They replaced him, and the replacement still lost the election. What no one on both sides of this, on either side of this debate, is addressing are the Biden policies that guaranteed the Democratic defeat.
Right. And Howie, it was interesting on the cognitive decline, hearing a leading CBS journalist saying that it was a thoroughly undercovered story and the media made a big mistake in not focusing more on it. Listen here to Jan Crawford from CBS.
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary for the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election.
How big a mistake, Howie, was it by the media not to dig deeper into what seemed obvious to everybody's eyes?
Huge. And Jonathan, I think your word delusional may be a little understated. It is crazy town. I mean, Biden would have lost in a landslide, especially after that disastrous debate. And here's my take. He's been running for president since 1987 when a plagiarism scandal forced him out. He finally wins in 2020. He likes flying around on Air Force One. And so he has convinced himself, well, I beat Trump once, maybe I could do it again. He's concocted this fantasy world version of what would have happened. And the reality is, I mean, he would have done much worse than Kamala Harris. And I think he didn't want to give it up. The Democratic Party forced him out. He's angry. And so he lives in this idea that, well, yeah, I think in the end I could have beaten him. And that's just something he never should have run for a second term in '82. That was a huge mistake. And I think the media have made that very clear.
And Bill, if he's saying I could have won, isn't he very much implicitly criticizing his own vice president?
Yes, and everyone else. Look, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, but I have some sympathy because the people who are now saying the Democrats' only problem was that Biden didn't get out early enough, they're the same people like Nancy Pelosi who are assuring us that he's sharp as a tack. There was nothing wrong with him and he should run. Now they've changed their minds because they were publicly exposed during the debate when people could see for themselves Joe Biden shouldn't run for president.
Howie, just real quick to wrap it up, is the media capable of correcting itself and not making the same mistakes that seem to repeatedly come up with certain sections of it?
Well, unfortunately, the media often don't learn the lessons of this kind of thing. And I think if there's a similar situation, I don't think we're going to see another 81 or 82-year-old nominee. They just go back. And look, this was a disastrous performance by the media showing that Joe Biden, whether you liked his policies, you didn't like his policies, should not have done what he did. And right now, he is living in a fantasy world, Jonathan.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.